we had a friend when we started LBW that said to me, congratulations on starting your own business. You now get to work half days and you get to pick which 12 hours you work. And so very true.
Welcome to Critical Thinking Required, hosted by LBW. This podcast is intended for free thinkers, entrepreneurs, and knowledge seekers. Join us as we discuss relevant financial topics, explore with guests their financial journeys, and engage with experts in industries such as space, media and entertainment, real estate, and many more. Buckle up and enjoy the ride. Welcome to Critical Thinking Required. You're with your hosts, my two partners, Dan Weiss and Nathaniel Leach, and of course, myself, Tim Bickmore. Thank you so much for joining us again.
In the last episode, we talked about understanding the cornerstone of your business and the preparation phase. In this second part, we are going to talk about positioning and resources.
So with that, let's just move into the next section here about positioning. So we were first speaking about preparation, which is kind of like pre-preparation, really. Positioning is the piece that then goes into the actual setting up of your business. So I already touched on some of the key professionals that you should work with when you're setting up your entity, which is mainly inclusive of a lawyer and a CPA. CPA, I'm talking about a legit CPA. I'm not talking about a tax preparer, H&R Block. Nothing against H&R Block, but they are not what I'm talking about when it comes to speaking to professionals that can help you determine what is the appropriate structure for your business. There are a myriad of different options available to you as a business owner. For us, we are structured as an LLC, taxed as a partnership. There are LLCs. If it's just one person, then it's going to be an LLC as a sole member LLC. You could choose to become a strictly named sole proprietor. You could set up a general partnership if you have multiple partners. I would not recommend that. That's what an LLC is for. You could also set up a LLC taxed as a S corporation. You could also set yourself up as a C corporation. Now there's even something called a B corporation. There are so many options available to you. Go to those professionals and ask them what they think is best for you. And you have to give them information to help them then determine what works best for you. And then you just kind of come out of it when you're communicating with each other and you figure out what works best for everybody involved. Anybody after that?
I mean, I'll say that we get a lot of questions on this particular topic. We have a lot of people that will say, I heard I should create an LLC. They don't really understand, understandably so, they don't understand that there's more to that. And then we'll say, okay, well, there's you could set up an LLC, like Nathaniel was saying, from a corporate structure and from a taxation purposes. And usually the question is what? Because that difference isn't talked about and the benefits of doing so. And there are better than ways for different businesses to do this. But this is something that we should get questions on a lot, and we do get questions on a lot. And to some degree, you can change some of these, and sometimes that's warranted to do. Sometimes it's very difficult to do.
It's very true. And understanding the structure is extremely important. And it also is dependent on if you have business partners, right? And how you want to set that up. Because then, as we have down in the list here, what we want to talk about is an operating agreement. So if you have multiple owners, what does that look like? And then the CPA should be able to guide you into the best tax advantage strategy. However, sometimes taxation is not the key winner. Sometimes you do need to be taxed differently due to unequal distributions, right? There's nuances within the tax structure or within the structure of the entity that need to be taken into consideration. That's why professional and then walking through what you are trying to achieve is extremely important. The one thing that we get on a lot of levels is, I want to save on tax. I understand it. Nobody wants to pay the tax man. We get it. However, you not paying the tax man can have an adverse negative effect in other ways. You have to think about it more holistically. You can't just think about how am I going to screw the tax guy. And so overall, it's extremely important to look at that. Once you kind of have that structure, I think then you got to look at the business plan. And that's really where I think Nathaniel hit it right when we first talked about the cornerstone. That's pre-preparation, then preparation. Now we're pre-preparation. Now we're really talking about preparation. The business plan is something that you can dive into, where Nathaniel mentioned at the very beginning of this podcast, what's my target market fit? Who am I going after? Does it make sense? Is there a big enough span of people? I will tell you that if you go and float your idea to people, most people are going to shut you down. Most people are going to tell you it's dumb. Most people are going to say there's no way that's going to work. I had a really interesting story that somebody mentioned, and this is hearsay, so I don't know if this guy is telling the absolute truth, but he mentioned that he was at a wedding with, guess who? Jeff Bezos. And what was Jeff Bezos doing at this wedding? Jeff Bezos didn't care what the wedding was going on. He was trying to get everybody to buy in his stupid business that was selling books online. Who would be doing that? $5,000 to buy into what is now Amazon, right? And everyone's like, selling books online? Dumb. So overall, you have to understand that a lot of people are going to be very opinionated, or they're going to tell you why it's not a good idea. But like any entrepreneur is going to tell you, at some point, you just got to jump. But that doesn't mean you need to jump without being prepared and without understanding, right? So there's a fine line between not allowing people to shut your idea down, and a fine line between not being prepared to actually make your idea and execute on it. We talk about it a lot. Just because you have a good idea, that's awesome. Now, how do you execute it to make sure that it can get done in a strategic and fashionable way? So a business plan can help you develop that. And then I would recommend going out to others and getting their opinions. But as Nathaniel says very, very well, they're just opinions, right? You have to cut through the noise. Sometimes they may be coming from a different perspective. They may be coming from a different opinion. That, you just have to understand and trust yourself that, you know what, I've done my research. I understand what's going on, and I'm going to make this move. But a business plan will definitely help set that up. Doesn't mean you have to send people your business plan either. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. Maybe you have to set up a deck depending on if this is going to be a tech startup and you got to go and raise a bunch of capital. Yes, you're going to have to go through the rigmarole of all of that. But a business plan really is more of a strategic framework to understand if your idea is executable and understandable. What about a continuity plan? Who wants to talk about a continuity plan?
I'll take a stab at it.
Go ahead.
We're actually required by our regulations to have a business continuity plan. So that kind of makes it easy, and that we can't shirk from that. But it's very important to be able to lay out within a business community, a continuity plan. What happens in the event that your office is forced to be closed due to some natural event? Where does your business then go?
COVID.
Like how can you guys operate? Case in point, COVID. Exactly. So a continuity plan can help with these events that come up that you have to then address, and still your business still needs to function. So that's what that continuity plan is for.
So Nathaniel hit it really well on the head, and the business plan. I just want to sum this up, and I'm going to use the example of Michael Phelps. Okay. So Michael Phelps in the Olympics had his goggles ripped off and he couldn't see in the water. And this was during, I believe, the gold medal race, I believe. And he ended up winning. And the reporter came to him and they said, Michael Phelps, how in the world did you win with your goggles coming off? And he's like, oh, well, guess what? My coach would do that to me. So I knew every single stroke it took to get to the other side of the pool with my eyes open or closed, right? What that's called is preparation. So the business plan and the continuity plan is truly understanding your risks, because they're going to happen. But then you know that when those goggles fall off, you're like, oh yeah, I got this. I understand how I need to shift and move. That's really what that business plan allows you to do, is because nothing ever goes your way. Your goggles are going to fall off at some point. But what's nice is that if you do your research and you do your background work, you can have those goggles fall off and you can still continue to compete in the race. That's really
good example. Here's another quick example too. I mean, what we're really talking about so far in this case is a stress testing machine. And businesses should be stress tested, because if you can make it on your worst days, You're going to really thrive on your best days. And that's what this is. And I mean, we see all the time on the personal side, where we want to do is stress test people and businesses so that they are really prepped to be able to handle any situation. We've seen it, for example, recently. We have a large client base at Netflix, right? And Netflix has just gone through another reorg. And so somebody asked us, I think it was a Netflix prospect, if we had some clients, unfortunately, that, or fortunately, depending on which one of those people you speak to, that have left Netflix during that reorg. And our answer was, yeah, they're fine. They're fine because they've been stress tested. So they were already positioned. They were already prepped to be able to handle those situations if they were to lose their personal jobs. This is no different. You got to prep your business to be able to handle whatever situation comes through. So when it gets bad, you're good. Because here's the thing, not everyone's going to be good. That is an opportunity from a business or a personal standpoint to take advantage of, is that's market share that gets opened up because some people won't have been prepped, won't make it.
So I think that then kind of falls into, as you now have a business plan, you're thinking about continuity if something goes wrong. You should also then think about, if you have partners, then you should think about an operating agreement. Or if you're structured as a C corporation or B corporation for whatever reason, you then have to think about the bylaws and what you want your board to, who you want on your board to be. And then you also have to think about financing. Are you going to be self-financed, or are you going to have to go, as Tim alluded to, if you're a tech startup, for example, you most likely need to go and raise capital. So what does that involve? There is a lot that goes into both of those processes. You need to be on the same page with your partners if you're negotiating an operating agreement. You need to actually think about a succession plan, which should actually be a part of your operating agreement or within the bylaws. If you're a corporation. And then you need to, with the financing, this is where you have multiple hats on as a business owners. You have to be a business owner, you have to run your business, and then you have to do your trade. And you have to find a way to somehow balance those two. The financing would probably fall under the being a business owner. You have to get that. If you need that financing, then you need to get that financing. There's no two ways about it. You have to go get it. So you have to simultaneously manage both of those hats, and it can be quite difficult. And that's where it goes back to being mentally prepared that this will be hard. It will be. There's no getting around it. It will be one of the hardest things that you have to do, aside from having a personal relationship with that loved one that you share your home with.
Comment is this: a lot of times we will get pushback, we'll call it, on an operating agreement. If there's more than just one of you in play, don't push back on that. Definitely do it. And what the attorney who drafted our latest revision of our operating agreement, which has been a little bit of time, it made it really clear. Like, these are things that you do when everybody's happy. You don't want to be messing with a change in the business or an operating agreement when someone's not happy, because it's just not going to get done, at least not in a costly or easy manner. So you want to do it when things are good. And we'll get a lot of times, oh, well, I trust my partners too, more than probably anybody, with maybe the exception of some close family members, and they're probably neck and neck with a lot of those people. So that's not the problem. You have to keep in mind that you're not just protecting you with an operating agreement, you're protecting everybody. You're protecting the company, and thus the employees that are involved. You are protecting your family. It's not necessarily because maybe someone has a grievance that becomes the issue. Somebody could die, right? And so how do you do that? My wife is extremely intelligent, but she doesn't want to be running a financial firm or have any kind of involvement. And that's not fair to these people or anybody else that are involved too. So the reality is that a lot of things could happen. It's that you just don't foresee. Why chance anything like that? Make sure that everybody is protected, because it's the respectable thing to do, not just in covering your own butt in this case, but making sure that everyone else is covered too. Did you want to hit on some financing, Dan? I know you mentioned that you wanted to get into some misconceptions there. Happy to talk about it. I think we should. I think I think it's really important for people to understand that there are different things to cover. I mean, you may have a very difficult time getting a loan to start your business, for example, right? A traditional bank is going to obviously prefer, maybe it isn't so obvious. So they're going to prefer that they can get collateral, because the likelihood is most businesses, they don't make it for various numbers of reasons. Preparation, I think, actually being probably the biggest reason people don't talk about the lack of it. But no bank wants to take that risk. They are anti-risk. That's how a bank operates and how they survive. So if they can grab something to hold, great. But a lot of times that doesn't exist, or at least doesn't exist up front. So great if that's there, but obviously terms need to be in play. But there are other places where a person can get funding, right? There are institutions like the SBA that could perhaps provide funding that would be considered more aggressive at probably higher rates, but they could do that. There are what's called, which we've actually heard in a lot of talk lately, hard money lenders, where you might have an individual that might give you funds, but they're personal funds, but usually those are going to be coming at a higher rate. At least if those people are doing their job correctly, it should be coming at a higher rate. There are situations where you can get investors involved. Again, you better have a good product and a good pitch deck and marketing thoughts to be able to do that. But that means they're going to take a piece of their business. I mean, I've got a friend years ago who did that and ended up not having a business 10 years later because he pieced out so much equity and he pushed himself out. There's debt you can get that can be convertible, meaning that it could become equity at a certain point. So there's a lot of things to do, and I think we should go a little bit deeper into that, but I'm going to let Tim and Nathaniel touch that piece. The other thing to consider, and diving back into family being part of this, is, and I'm not recommending this for every business, but when we launched LBW, I mean, we secured avenues in which we could get financing, which included, for example, one avenue was a HELOC, a home equity line of credit, on my property. And I believe, if I remember correctly, I think Nathaniel's property as well at the time. And we sure didn't want to use that. I mean, we're very cautious about taking personal items and crossing them with business. We prefer not to see that, but we didn't have a lot of options. So that meant that we were tying our personal lives to the business to be able to make sure that it could be funded. So we better have felt pretty good about that. But that's a mechanism as well too, one that I think all of these actually should all be taken with great caution. But understanding that there are multiple options and that there's multiple prices to those options and costs is really important.
And I think to understand what option you want to go through, you got to understand where you want to be, right? And that goes back to, is this a lifestyle business or is this an enterprise business? Do you have a large tangible addressable market where you can make this business very, very big? As Mark Cuban likes to say, it's better to own 1% of a watermelon than 100% of nothing, right? So it depends on how you really are looking at what you're trying to achieve, because that will drive your financing options. So, for example, if you're a lifestyle business, you don't need to go give up percentages of your company. You could probably go get some different debt. You could probably make it through. You could start breaking even, different things. We see a lot of the times where spouses are supporting a solopreneur or entrepreneur where they don't need to make money because the spouse is making enough to float the household. That's a really great position to be in, because once that entrepreneur or the business owner starts making money, it's really just savings to the household from a personal standpoint, right? So there's definitely different ways of looking at it and how to go about it, and doing it a little bit more in a sensible manner, versus debt versus equity, how you kind of want to go about that. Do you get angel investors? Do you not? It just depends on what your business is and if the need is there. Now, you don't want to go, for example, if you're going to go hard money, right, as Dan mentioned. So what that really means is you're going out to a private individual who's going to give you X amount of dollars, but because they're a private individual and you're most likely pretty risky, meaning a bank won't take you on, they're going to require a pretty high interest rate in order to make it make sense. Plus, they're also going to maybe throw on some terms that aren't as favorable if you miss that interest payment. It's not a fun, go ahead.
Tip, just to be clear, hard money is a loan, not equity, correct? It's debt.
Loan, yep. It's a debt,
Okay,
yes.
so it's a private individual who loans you money at a very high interest rate with the potential to have very extraneous terms. Can you go into an example of what those extraneous terms might be?
Yeah, I mean, they probably could throw on, for example, if you're so it's like if you see at a vendor, if you don't pay my invoice by 30 days, I'm going to charge 5% per month until you pay it. So they can throw on similar terms like that. You miss an interest payment, well, then I'm going to tack on additional percentage points in order for you if every month you're late. Because what happens is that they can be a little bit more aggressive and ask for more because you are not able to get funding probably from anywhere else. So if you're going to go that route, you better make sure that it makes sense, you can fund it, and it probably needs to be short-term, not long-term over time. Which then means you really need to understand your revenue projections. You really need to understand your growth and what that really looks like. I think the same goes for equity investors. Do you really think you can grow this to a certain size? What does it really look like? And that goes back to understanding your market, understanding who you're going after. So these questions are not small questions. They're very big questions. But like we talked about at the very beginning of this podcast, this is a whole different hat than being good at cooking, selling real estate, buying real estate, starting a tech company because you're a good coder. Like these questions are a whole new really area of expertise. So you either have to catch up really quickly and at least understand so you don't get caught beneath the sheets, or you got to go find good strategic partnerships like Nathaniel mentioned. A CPA and a lawyer are key to this because they can help guide you through what makes and what doesn't make sense. So this financing piece is extremely important. Even if you're a solopreneur, we've seen people that have taken money that it didn't make sense and they didn't understand what they're getting themselves into, and they didn't use a lawyer. They used a handshake agreement, and those can turn south very, very quickly. I'm not just referencing somebody who's trying to be the next Jeff Bezos. Like this is somebody who's starting up a lawn company. You're starting up, a restaurant. And so it's just really, really important to make sure you have somebody that, and maybe it's a friend that's in the business or whatever it may be to help you understand what's really going on and what you're actually signing. Ooh, we should talk about resources then. We talked about a lot, but we should probably talk about other resources that people know. I can start off. It's really, I mentioned to this earlier, support system, massive. It is absolutely massive. To this day, I don't think it's talked about enough that you are networking the day you can speak. Because when we started this business and we asked for help, which is sometimes a very humbling and vulnerable place to be, to say, hey, I need help. I need help to start this. I need help from different directions. It's amazing how many people came out of the woodwork for all three of our networks, not just mine, not just Dan's, and not just Nathaniel's. And that's because we've built relationships with people who are just excited for us and just wanted to see us succeed. And so we used that relationship in order to help us understand some of the things that we needed to understand. So it's just so important that it could be a colleague that you've worked with over years. It could be a family member, a friend, whatever it may be. A support system is so much broader than a professional support system. Because what could also happen is that person could be like, hey, I actually have a really good friend who's a great lawyer. You should really speak to him. Or I have a CPA. You can start getting to some of these professionals who've been worked with, been vetted on your behalf, as long as you have that as a trusted resource. So there's just so many different ways that you can start accessing those types of resources just within your own network. Don't be afraid just to ask for help, because it's amazing that people just want to typically help. A lot of people, for example, someone called us up and said, we want to start a business. We've done this a few times. We'll sit down, give them an hour of our time. We'll send them resources. Absolutely. We want to see them succeed. It's the American dream. It's a wonderful thing. It's scary. It's risky, but we'd rather see someone going prepped and ready to go than just go flat and fall on their face. That's not fun to see. So when you're looking at that, it's just extremely important to ask. You might get some no's, but you're going to get a lot of yeses. More yeses than I would say no's when it comes to just asking for resources, help in any way. You have other professionals as well. Nathaniel hit it on the head: lawyers, CPA, financial advisors like ourselves. The list goes on. Insurance, different things. You need to have access to a team. You need a team. And so if you're going to go in it by yourself, you need to make sure you surround yourself with a team and understand that. Dan, you probably can speak on some of the resources locally and also on a national scale, since you've really built in a lot of those relationships that will help entrepreneurs in a lot of different ways.
Sure. I do think that the best resources are the ones that Tim just mentioned, because those are the ones that are going to be very constant. And I'll add in the other ones that are going to be really constant are the ones that Nathaniel mentioned earlier. Your CPA, you can get close to that person. Your attorneys, same deal. Like you got to trust those people. You have to vet them. Talk to people about how you vet them. But I think that those are really very, very important roles to your business. You've got to see, at least we do, and I think it's been very successful for us, is that the people within the communities in which you work, you want to find great people, and if you find great people, you should view them as an extension of your business and treat them as such, and they will treat you well back if that's the case. But there's just so much knowledge there that you'll use time and time again. But to answer Tim's question about maybe some specific places that people can go to outside of those concepts that are very critical. On the national level, there's an organization called S-Corp. I'll be honest, I think S-Corp is hit or miss, but S-Corp aims to get, a lot of times they're retired professionals, not always, but in very specific areas that are volunteering out of the good of their heart time to be able to mentor people. We use the S-Corp chapter here in Madison. At that time, we were really looking for marketing help primarily. But we try to develop, or try to, I should say, pinpoint where we felt our weakest links are. Sometimes you don't know, and then go from there. So that was very helpful. Another organization that exists outside of Madison, but we've been involved in Madison, really, Nathaniel has, is Bunker Labs. Has been a good resource. Luckily, here in Madison, we have a fantastic number of schools, but at the center of that is the University of Wisconsin, and there's a lot of great resources within the university setting that they're not just open to just the university. So, like here in Madison, there is a law and entrepreneur clinic that is fantastic, right? And there's also a small business consulting outfit out of UW as well that's very helpful. This is different, but yes.
There's also through the UW system extension, stuff for specifically agricultural businesses. There's a lot of resources if you do some digging when it comes to not just the University of Wisconsin-Madison, but the extension schools as well.
Yeah, people that are designed to do that. And a lot of times I feel like they're like twiddling their thumbs because no one comes and asks, and that's exactly what they want you to do. And yeah, that's not just tied to Wisconsin. I mean, that university settings all across the nation are going to have that. It's just, I know that we've done a really great job of building that up here. There are national organizations like Business USA, export.gov, the Small Business Association, Merlin, which I don't know if that's local or large than that, but it's similar to SCORE. To be honest, we didn't get what we really were looking for out of the Chamber of Commerce that we selected, but Madison has a number of really active chambers of commerce, as do a lot of other communities. You may find some great resources. You'll definitely find great people involved in building. And of course, there's a lot of different networking groups, some that are very specific, some that are not. Some, to be quite honest, we found to not be helpful or even distracting. Some we have found to been very helpful in building relationships and creating think tanks and so on. So there's a lot of different concepts out there. There are incubators and so on that may or may not make sense for your business that you can lean on, professional think tanks. It's just a matter of searching a little bit and being open-minded, but those resources are out there.
And I think it goes back to the preparation too on knowing what you're trying to get out of some of these things. I mean, even incubators, accelerators, they're great. Depends on, you need to do your due diligence though. Typically speaking, they may just have you be doing a glorified pitch book, but guess what? That glorified pitch book might be really beneficial because they may get you in front of actual investors that are really seriously going to consider it. So it may be like, you know what, I'm going to go through this process so I can get to the edge of getting potential investors. But don't go in maybe thinking that you're going to get this great business plan, really figure it all out, because they may not have the skill sets. That may not be the incentive of the organization to actually do. So it's just understanding, do your research on those types of situations. Not saying that all accelerators or incubators are like that, just saying make sure you go ahead and understand it. Did you have something to add, Nathaniel?
No, this is really your guys' ballpark. This is why you have partners, so they can pick up the slack.
I guess then some thoughts and some closings, if I can tell a short, brief comment / story, and 2 other brief thoughts after that. We had a friend when we started LBW that said to me, congratulations on starting your own business. You now get to work half days and you get to pick which 12 hours you work. And so very true, very true. And we've definitely lived that as many business owners do. But as I mentioned earlier, I wouldn't give that up. I think that's worked really well for me and for my family. But nonetheless, it's just a comment I'll never forget. The 2 thoughts I just really wanted to hang my hat on is one, Tim mentioned it a few minutes ago, to ask for the help. It really is out there. We were shocked as to how many people were willing and able to help us, but it's just so hard to ask. It doesn't need to be hard, but it just doesn't, it feels like it's hard. It shouldn't be. We would be very happy to help people. There are others out there too. Pay it forward, but take the help and pay it forward. There's no shame in that. There's not enough time in this lifetime to make all the mistakes yourself. Number 2, Tim talks a lot about this, but he's not the originator of this. Don't be afraid to ask stupid questions. You're not going to feel stupid afterwards. Yes, it was Nathaniel, the guy up there, as we referenced before. Who cares if people look at you as being dumb? Then they're not being vulnerable enough to grow, if that's the case. The reality is, I'd much rather find myself comfortable with asking a dumb question now so I don't act and look a fool later. Just ask it. Ask for help and ask the stupid questions.
My final thoughts. I got 3, I guess, but I'll be quick. The first one is, as Dan mentioned, if you really want to start a business, go do it. The thing that I've realized and that I'm slowly coming to understand is, if you understand astronomy or physics, you have to understand that us being here right now today doing this podcast, the probability is extremely low. We're already lucky to have an Earth that we can actually breathe air, have oxygen, water. Which really means going to what this really turns into is the more younger slang of YOLO. You only live once. Take the shot, take a chance if you really want to grow, but be prepared, be rational about it, right? I mean, and Nathaniel say that all the time, because one of the most beautiful things about business, regardless if it's a restaurant or if you're building Amazon, is that business is a creative outlet. And people don't talk about that enough. You have to have a vision. You have to have something to see, and you get to build it, and no one else tells you. It's the most liberating and most terrifying thing that you're going to do, which leads me into my second point, which is starting a business, if you allow it, will make you grow personally in so many different ways. Because if you don't grow, the business will run you over. It will. Once you get the ball rolling, it doesn't care. Once that monster, as my brother will say, once that monster's going, the monster's going to eat you up if you don't figure out how to tame it, understand it, and grow with it. So start figuring that out really, really quick, which means you have to be willing to evolve. You have to be willing to say that I was wrong. You have to be willing to be humble. You have to let go of the ego, all that fun stuff. And it will be extremely beneficial in the long run. And my last thought really is just like we talked about a lot, is be prepared, but also try to live above the noise.
I'd also like to touch on communication. Communication, it's critical. It's absolutely critical. Aside from my wife, these two guys are the people that I speak to most in the world. So you better know how to talk to them, or else you're screwed. Understand your priorities. For me, I think that it's probably true for all of us. The priorities are my significant other, my wife, my family, and then the business. That's it. That's all you have room for as an entrepreneur. That's it. And you got to balance all of those. So you have to figure out what works for you, and then you gotta do it. And then finally, I'd just like to end with that: be mentally prepared for everything that's coming. Tim said it very well. Be prepared and rational about it. Be rational about your expectations. Be rational about those rosy sales figures that you have in mind for your first 5 years. Probably not going to happen. So then you have to have a plan in place about what happens if they're not. You have to be financially prepared for the unknown. And if you're not, you will fail. And I guess I'll end with that failure isn't a terrible thing. There's been a long history of entrepreneurs that have failed multiple times before they have swung one out of the park. You learn from those failures, you build upon them, the knowledge compounds, and then you are positioning yourself for that big fat pitch. It's what it's all about. We've just been very fortunate in that our failures have not ended our business. Sure, we've had failures along the way, but we've learned from them and we've grown stronger because of them.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight. We hope you've enjoyed the podcast as much as we enjoyed talking about it. Be good to yourself and each other. Until next time, have a great night.
Thank you for taking the time to start your journey of thinking differently and listening to LBW talk about stuff they love. Until next time.